Uh, they're for kids. Beginnings are for kids. Okay, we go right into the podcast nowadays. Right, that's what we do.
Sure.
This is our guest. Our guest today is Michael Alkaraki.
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 Yeah, there you go.
I only said it 10 times before it started. Alkaraki. You got applause going for you. Okay, so Alkaraki. I'll get it. I'll get it by the end of the show, or maybe by tomorrow.
Right.
Attorney Alkaraki. And Attorney Alkaraki, I want to welcome you to the program. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
And I want to say that I love the name of your firm.
Sure.
Tell people what it is.
Sure. It's Leahy Hoste Alkaraki, and our host, Mr. Leahy, of no relation.
No relation, yeah.
Yeah.
Leahy's a kind of it's not a common name, but it's not an uncommon name.
True.
A lot of successful Leahys. They have the Leahy building on Ontario, right when you're going on the ramp there. Mm-hmm. Have you ever noticed that?
Yes.
So they got the Leahy building.
Yes.
I get a lot of people always send me pictures of that building. Hey, look at the Leahy building. I know. Sure. I used to live right up there.
Sure.
My mom has a building there. I was there for many years at Clark in Ontario by the Hard Rock Cafe. Matter of fact, she bought that building right when they built the Hard Rock Cafe.
Oh, yeah.
Some years ago.
Wow.
So welcome to the program. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Well, no, first, let's start here. What kind of work do you do?
So I'm a lawyer, and my practice area is plaintiff's personal injury, medical malpractice, and wrongful death. That also includes product liability and a bunch of subcategories to personal injury work.
So you are a trial attorney.
I am a trial lawyer, yes, indeed.
If someone called you a litigator, would you be offended?
No, I wouldn't be. I wouldn't get offended. No,
but you correct
accurate. No, and it's accurate. It's just maybe not as specific.
Okay, because I got to say, because I've interviewed a lot of trial attorneys,
sure,
and some get offended if I call them a litigator. Well, I am not a litigator.
That's funny. I actually have never made that distinction. I suppose that maybe I'm speculating, but I think perhaps in their mind they think of litigators as maybe filing a lawsuit and resolving it, where the trial lawyers really are focused on the trial. But the reality is the trial is what informs your resolution the entire way. So I think maybe they're thinking that the litigator stops short of trial sometimes. But we all do if the case resolves, and that's the goal. The goal is to show that you're ready to try the case so you can get the best settlement offer and maximize the recovery for your client. So maybe they're just kind of doing their own kind of subtle marketing by making that distinction.
I get that. You say, so many guys, they just want to settle cases. I go to court.
Sure.
And again, if you go to court, your opponent knows that.
Sure.
And is more likely to settle, right?
Sure.
And if they're more likely, that makes you more of a litigator.
Yeah, true. Yeah, and I guess now if we're going to, I don't know that it's so necessary to do this, but if we're going to kind of dig a little bit deeper into that, they've got kind of three separate approaches or stages maybe there. One, so you've got the trial lawyer, which in colloquially means taking it the whole way. You got the litigator. This is from the distinction that this unnamed person that maybe brought up. The litigator, from the perspective of the trial lawyer, maybe doesn't take it the whole way, but the litigator thinks, so we go to court, even if we don't try the case all the time, and then you've got the firms that settle these cases a lot without a lawsuit. And that's appropriate and warranted at times and advisable from time to time. But it also is associated with a kind of large volume, low value type cases. And that's definitely
car accidents.
Well, car accidents can result in horrible situations.
Oh, that's true.
But we're talking more about maybe kind of
fender benders.
Sort of, yeah, where there's not what you might call a catastrophic injury.
Slip and falls.
Same thing. The mechanism of the injury doesn't say anything about the nature of the injury, right? And the reason I bring this up, right, and I'll make a joke about it a little bit, is because you have what are called those missed cases, which may be referred to as, I think, minor impact soft tissue, right? And there's a whole cottage industry around those cases, including typical insurance tactics that like to focus on more of the mechanism of the injury than the actual injury and the challenge, because sometimes major injuries come out of that. So there's a whole, and so much of this stuff is touches upon ideas that the public may have about personal injury attorneys, and I want to make sure that in discussing it, I'm real clear about what we're talking about.
I appreciate that because I think you're exactly right. People kind of categorize this stuff like it's a small thing,
Sure.
and it's only a small thing to those if it's not you.
Well, that's one thing too. I mean, certainly it's when it's you, it's no small matter, right?
Nothing's a small matter.
Nothing's a small matter, and we certainly treat all of our clients that way, and they deserve it.
So I always like to begin by asking what people do because it's so important.
Sure.
It kind of why you're here.
Right.
That's not why. I like to interview attorneys, so I don't care what kind of law you practice.
For sure.
And I've interviewed a lot of personal injury attorneys, a lot of trial attorneys.
Sure.
And defense, criminal defense, things like that. But I always like to then find out about the attorney, like where are you from?
Sure. So I grew up just west of the city in the Oak Park River Forest area. I went to OPRF High School, class of '99. I went to St. Joseph's College in Indiana, where I studied philosophy, political science, and something else was in there. I think I had a double minor in psychology, but I don't know if it's even worth mentioning. But I did play baseball there. And then when I was done, I went to Loyola right away, Loyola Law, 3 years there, and started practicing in '06 at this firm.
Should we talk? Oh, you started at this firm?
I did start at the firm.
So you're getting ahead of me because I always like to talk about what an attorney's first job is.
Sure.
But first, tell us where you went to school.
Loyola.
You went to
Loyola.
Now,
I teach there now too. Actually,
were you all? And we're going to talk a little bit about that.
Sure.
Did you always want to be an attorney?
I don't know about that. I mean, it was certainly something that I started saying with some degree of regularity when adults asked me what I wanted to do when I quote unquote grew up. And
have you grown up?
That's a good question. I think we should. Yeah, I have. Do I have more growing up to do? Probably. Hopefully it'll continue.
I'm still waiting to grow up. I'm 60 years old. I'm waiting.
I hear you. But in some sense, I always had a little bit of an idea that I might want to be a lawyer. Although I did not grow up around lawyers, I don't really think that I appreciated exactly what it meant to be a lawyer. Also, there's so many ways to do it.
What was it why you think that was?
Well, I just think that probably some of the same stuff that attracted me to maybe pursuing philosophy is because it is an undergrad degree, because you can make the argument that it's not necessarily a practical degree to have. However, I will say that without question, it helps you make sense of a complex world, or at least get rid of some stuff that might not be right. And I also, there's a similar thought process that goes into the concept of law and justice, which is probably a philosophical term. We can define it.
Absolutely.
But we can spend a lot of time talking about what that definition means. And I think those two
attorneys
things are really...
can.
Sure, for sure. Well, without question, that's the entire practice of law. Is hopefully the idea is, that you arrive at justice, and that's what we should be focused on.
So then you went to law school, right. And did you go right after college?
I did, right after. Yep.
And then you went to Loyola, and what kind of work did you do at Loyola? Did you do any, like in any of the teams or anything like that?
I didn't do a ton of sort of extracurricular within the school at the time. I actually do a lot now. But I did, I was in the Consumer Law Review, and I was an editor and senior editor. And
that's pretty impressive.
It was good.
That's one of the things that are on your resume for the rest of your life.
It's on there.
Yeah,
it's nice, and it's consistent with, sort of the general ethic that I bring to the practice. I mean, I knew I wanted to do litigation, and I knew that I probably wanted to be representing people rather than corporations. Not that there's anything wrong with representing corporations, but I kind of thought that my personality and skill set and sort of interests kind of align more with being a consumer-facing lawyer. There was what else did I do there? I did this volunteer teaching program. It was a juvenile justice program where we went to the facility and spent time with the kids, and they are really kids who are there, and basically try to educate, in no particular order, educate ourselves about some aspects of the juvenile justice system, which is obviously not my practice area, but it's good to have a idea of what's happening. And I think I've had that attitude my entire career, but also to kind of help them and be a resource for them and teach them a little bit about the law and orient them and where they're at, and hopefully be beneficial for everybody. So I've done a lot of stuff like that. I'm sure I'm leaving some stuff out.
I always like to ask, and you kind of already answered, but I'm going to ask it anyway, about what your first job was out of law school.
Well, depending how you look at it, I was working for free at the Board of Education. Out of law school. Yeah, no, I was working at this firm, at the firm I'm at now.
While you were in law school?
So I was there as a
Interning?
law clerk when I was finishing school my last semester after having a bunch of different experiences, public interest in government, in a variety of contexts and settings. I just thought I needed some private experience. So I actually applied, I replied on Loyola's own internal site for a law clerk position at this firm. And that's just coming into, like 15, 20 hours a week as a law student getting paid whatever it was, 15 or 20 bucks an hour. And that turned into a full-time job when I graduated. Well, really when I was licensed, once I, took the bar, so.
Well, here's where I'm kind of getting at, because I have two sons. I mentioned to you I have two sons. Both of my sons are in law school.
Sure.
And I always ask attorneys, what would be your advice to my kids or your own kids?
Sure.
Before I ask, let me ask you. You mentioned you have a child.
I have a 2-year-old son and a 3-month-old daughter.
As an attorney, is that something you think that you would encourage your own children to do?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, the thing that's okay. So this is now a parenting question rather than a legal question. In a way. At least that's the way I'm receiving it. Is one of the things that's like immediately to me apparent about, I should say obvious instead of apparent, because I'm about to talk about being a parent, is that these little creatures, right? Who knows what their interests and motivations are.
I'm really worried about what you think, because it reflects on what you think about being a lawyer. So many lawyers, you ask them, hey, would you want your kids to be an attorney? They're like, no way, I don't want my kids to be an attorney. And it really kind of just reflects their own view on the profession, rather than what they want their kids to do.
Oh yeah, definitely. So what I was actually, and I agree with you 100%, which is what I was kind of going to go to, like, the idea of that's really what the question is. How do I feel about it? For me, it's been great. I love it. There are some things about it. I don't love 100% of the things about it, but overwhelmingly I do. Most notably at the core, representing people who really need your help. And you can get a lot out of yourself when you really are committed to that principle, right? Because you can go further than you would if it's not just about you. So I think you're already connected to something that is that's not about you, and it's whether it's more important than you or not is a different kind of question. But the point is, you owe the client everything you got. So that's a great way to get everything out of yourself for the client. I love that. That's maybe not for everybody, because there's a lot of I'm not going to say like there's a lot of anxiety you can have as a consequence of that. There are long hours. There are sacrifices you make, but that's part of, if you don't love that stuff, don't do it. If you get fired up about that and you find every once in a while when you're really kind of feeling that heat, and in someone's case you find like, you're doing your best work, that's a pretty awesome feeling. And if you can kind of get reconnected with that sufficiently, it's great for you. If you can't and it stresses you out, or you don't like being on trial, or you're not comfortable rejecting offers that are significant, which can be stressful, right? Then maybe don't do it. So for me, I think it's great, but it's not easy, and it should not be easy. I
agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree. Like my own experience is like, I don't think I've ever told my kids, hey, you should go to law school. I really didn't.
Right.
And I was, I was pleasantly surprised when my first son decided to go.
Yeah.
And when my second son decided, I was kind of surprised about that. Although he was always like in debate, and his mother was always like, "You'd be a great litigator or trial attorney."
Sure.
And so she was always encouraging him. But I really, but again, I like what I do also. I think I think being an attorney is an honor. It's a passion. And one thing about being an attorney, and when I went to law school, I never thought I was going to be an attorney. I thought I was just going to run my own business.
Yeah, sure.
And I already had a business degree, so they're like, well, you don't want to get an MBA. You already have. So what would you do? Go to law school. So that's what I did. Right. And now I run my own business.
Yeah,
but it's a law business
for sure.
Absolutely. So I, again, I'm very happy my kids do that. But again, now let's go back to that, because what kind of advice would you have for either kids in law school or just getting out of law school?
So the advice I'd give to people in law school or sort of newer lawyers is really it's really just kind of being honest with myself or where I was at that time. So it's going to be specific, to
you're closer to it
circumstances. So I
actually not that much,
when
because
I grow this beard, there's a fair amount of gray.
I went to law school later in life, so I didn't go right out of.
Sure.
I wasn't in my 20s.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things I would actually, depending on the person, maybe recommend, is because I think it's worthwhile. Although I did not do it because I had a bit of a sense of urgency to hurry up and get right to school, because I didn't really have time to wait for the reasons that sometimes people don't. But I would say if you have an opportunity to take some time, maybe after college, maybe a year, to either, or whatever it is, a couple of years or however many you need, to get out into the world and get some experience, I think that's hugely beneficial. And this is really my own situation. I think academically, I probably needed to have a little bit more discipline to really kind of hit the ground running in law school, because I took it quite seriously, but I hadn't really developed the academic chops immediately. So it took me probably that first semester, and that was a bit of a growing period, but it was good. And I knew going into that was going to be the case.
Law school's difficult.
Absolutely.
What I found in law school is that everybody was a good student.
Oh yeah, without question.
So when you're in undergrad, it's like only you were a good student because you wouldn't have gotten to go to law school otherwise. So it's like, well, hey, I'm a good student. Yeah. But then you go to law school, and you're like, oh, everybody's a good student.
Totally. It's like even in the school that I played baseball with in college. It's Division II, but it was fairly competitive. I mean, right away I knew it was like everybody here was the best or one of the best players on their team, right? And there's 50 or 60 guys here, right? So you get a lot of that kind of. So it's like, how do you distinguish yourself?
You're ringing all the right bells. Yeah, isn't that right, Lucas?
Absolutely.
Well, he mentioned actually that he's in the middle of his college career right now. So part of the reason we talked about it. But another thing. That I would tell kind of students or newer attorneys is if you don't know what you want to do exactly, number one, that's okay, because even people who are sure they know what they want to do often change. But I would say get a wide breadth of experience so that you really have something approximating like a broad view of what the practice is, because there's so much out there that you can do. I mean, you could break it down. We were drawing very minor distinctions. They're not so minor necessarily between a so-called litigator and trial attorney, to the extent that there is a difference there, which maybe there's not, but we can make it if we'd like to. But you've got transaction litigation, two totally different worlds. I mean, that's a totally different, right? And then even within, you have so many subcategories where and look at you, your practice is, you're running a business with your law degree. Like, that's combining things there's not a class for that.
There is not.
Right?
No.
So get that experience, and you're going to bring with you your character and your spirit, your intelligence, your tools. And that's what law school is going to help you develop, hopefully, if you don't have that already, where you can really take this stuff and how you can fit in and build a career. So I would say keep an open mind early on. There's a lot of pressure, and I'm kind of going on and on and on because there's so many. I teach students, and I love talking to students and sharing the things that I wish I knew back then. That's teaching in a very simple way. It's like,
are you teaching in law school, or
I teach at Loyola? Yeah,
so I teach law school.
Law school, yeah. I teach,
because I went to Loyola, not the law school.
Sure.
But I went to. I was downtown at Lewis Towers at the time. It's changed a lot down there. That whole footprint has changed.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I mean, even since I've been gone.
Yeah,
it sounds like you've been gone a little longer than I have.
Well, I probably have a little bit, but I did fight my way through school. But it's important. Again, you could tell that you like this kind of stuff, and I mean, leading students is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And because you can see the passion that you have on it.
Well, it's fun. It makes the practice more interesting. One of the things that goes on in the law, I mean, you know this, anyone who's practicing knows this, there are a lot of lawyers who aren't necessarily super happy. And you can read about it. You don't need me to tell you about it. You can read it in any of the bar journals that come out every month. Now, also, lawyers maybe can be a little bit better at complaining, so maybe it's not tougher on us than anyone else. But without question, there's been a lot of not just research and publication of the mental health issues and wellness, but also even in the bar associations. And frankly, I'm involved with some of them. There are programs that are there to help through the Illinois Bar Foundation, Lawyers
Been a big
Care.
push the last couple of years
Without question.
for alcohol abuse, and now it's part of our ethical training to get training in that area.
Yeah. So to me, I mean, I feel like if you're really doing the work, and when I say really doing the work, I mean fully committed to it in a way where it is a passion or something approximating a calling, you're gonna. It's not all going to be fun times. It's going to be stressful. It's going to be a lot of work. Clients are depending on you. They want you to work magic sometimes. You have to explain to them you're not a magician, but then come through with something that is law, not magic, that will help them, right? And they want that, and you want to deliver that. So that's a tall order, and you have to manage their expectations. And I think it calls on a lot of different sets of skills, I think, to do this work the right way for people who know you're bringing everything you got to it. And I think it can be stressful, but if you can find that if you have a passion, or at least get in touch with it from time to time, that will carry you through, I think, a lot of the difficulty and stress that comes along with that, and that's a great feeling.
Now let's talk a little bit about when you got out of law school, because you were already working for the group, for the firm that you're with now.
Sure.
And you moved in as an attorney. Was that a smooth transition?
Well, yeah, I mean, it felt pretty smooth because my only concern at the time was just kind of, getting a job that I liked and being able to support myself and not deliver pizzas anymore. So that was like pretty smooth. That said, though, and I'm going to really answer your question now, is it's also a rude awakening, because now you've got the stamp of that you're a lawyer and you're official, and you're subject to all the responsibilities of a lawyer, and your colleagues and your clients. We had this idea that once you're a lawyer, you're supposed to know everything, but that's not how anything in life works, right? You graduate law school, and most people, including myself at the time, didn't know how to file a complaint at the courthouse. Mm-hmm. So and I would say that, especially in my practice area and the way that it's traditionally sort of, structured, the plaintiff's attorneys get thrown out into the fire. Right away.
Did you do that?
Oh yeah,
because sure. a lot of attorneys, they, especially larger firms, like they say, they make me sit behind a desk for a couple of years, but they threw you right out.
Yeah. I would say I had really good support also, and I had Tom Leahy was an excellent mentor, and then even my partner now, I mean, he's 9 years my senior. I would in some ways consider him also to be a mentor. Sure. Although, we're kind of becoming slightly more peers. As you
get older, you get closer to age.
Yeah, but they're incredible lawyers, and I had good people around me, but it's also kind of like, hey, you're going to need to figure this out, so do it now. And that's a great way to learn, assuming you're not put in a position where you're really not able to effectively represent.
Here's a question I like to ask.
Yeah.
We and I, we've never met before, so I always, that's kind of my favorite interview.
Sure.
I shouldn't say that, because I think my second or third time after I interview someone a couple of times, then those are probably my favorite. But,
sure.
But let me ask you this. Do you remember the first time you went to court?
You know what? I actually don't.
Really?
Which is surprising, because I remember it was a big deal in my head at the time, but I cannot reconstruct it. And I don't know why. I think it's just because over the years I put so many memories together. I definitely have some stories I remember from court in the early days, especially, including... Can I share?
Sure.
It's not my first time in court, but I do remember it was within the first 6 months of me probably being a lawyer, and I was in court, and a matter was up. There was a fairly complex matter, and there was
state or federal?
It was in state court, and most of our practice, but not all of it, is in state court at the Daly Center. And there was a judge on the bench who's very well regarded, and also has a reputation for being really like, let's go, we got to get this, control of the courtroom, but a really good judge. The short of it is, so I go to court, and it's an early time, early appearance for me in court as a newer attorney, and it's packed, and of course everything you do is in front of an open court of people. So you're like, I just want to look professional, and I want to look like I belong here. It's on your mind, right? And I'll obviously represent the client the right way. And my boss was there, like who had just hired. He actually was. He was just bouncing around, probably saying hi to people. Maybe he had a matter up, but he was there. And I remember the judge said X, whatever that sentence was, and I said, "Oh, actually, Judge." I didn't say Judge so and so. I said just the judge's last name. And the judge I was talking to. This was a different judge who had had a ruling on this case or something. And she said, we're not professional base or athletes. I won't say whatever, but she's like, we're not professional athletes. We say judge so-and-so. And I was like, oh, that's the worst thing, right? And I wanted to look over at my boss, but I didn't. And instead I said, I forgot what I said. Oh, I know what I said. It was, Judge, if you could take it easy me a little bit, my new lawyer, my boss is here. And the courtroom laughed. Everyone laughed. And I got out of that situation. And that's when I understood the role of politics in the practice of law, because the judge was very nice.
I like that. I always like to ask that question because I've been with lawyers, and I'm trying to remember the first time I went to a courtroom. But I've been with a lot of lawyers when I brought them the first time.
Sure.
And I remember I had a young lady, and she had never been to court. And she asked me, "Can I go to court with you?" And I said, "Yeah, sure."
Yeah.
She, "What do I do?" I said, "Just stand there."
Yeah, right.
And then introduce yourself.
Sure.
And she was really nervous.
Yeah.
And all she did was introduce herself.
Sure.
But it breaks the edge, you know. Now,
absolutely.
And now you've done it.
Right.
And it's not as big a deal as you thought it was.
Right. Totally. It's not a big. It's just it's like being on a radio show, for example.
Exactly.
I get a little bit nervous, and hopefully it's going all right. But I feel like this is a pretty casual conversation.
I think you've done this before.
Oh, yeah. Well, I do stuff. You know, as a lawyer, especially if you're going to be someone who tries cases, you should know how to talk. A little bit.
I see you do some CLE also.
Yeah, I do a lot of CLE, and I teach, and through the Chicago Bar Association, I periodically host a television show where we have, you know, like a host and two guests discussing a legal or public policy topic. So I have a little experience doing it, and you make it very.
I think it's obvious.
Great environment. Yeah.
Well, this is our law library.
Yeah,
so.
I like it.
So again, I think I always like to ask that question because as a new attorney, you got this idea of the way things are.
Sure.
And then you learn that most court appearances are kind of a waste of time, aren't they?
I wouldn't say they're a waste of time for a variety of reasons. Number one, you know, it's my job to make them worthwhile.
Okay, I stand corrected.
Two, I don't want to say on the radio or anywhere else going forward with. Although I will say this, certainly, you know, there's costs and expenses associated with it.
But what I mean
some
by,
of it is just checking in.
What I mean by a waste of time, I mean it's like nothing substantial is happening. You're the two lawyers are standing before the judge and really setting another time to come back before the judge because the work is really done between the attorneys.
Totally,
right?
and I fully understood the question.
Yeah,
I was having a little fun
I get
with
it. I get it.
But yeah, you know, I would say, you know, a decent number or proportion of the court appearances are you know, statuses, case management conferences, where the judge, the court, is basically saying, "Hey, I'm checking in with you. Where are you guys, or where are you? And what do you need to do? Is there anything in controversy that I need to decide?" Because what the judge wants to do is move the case efficiently to the end of, you know, and get it off the docket with a good resolution, right? So, you know, that's part of the job of, you know, the judge is to have the court system and his or her court move smoothly with just efficient results. So, yeah, if I'm doing my job, you know, for the most part, and I'm moving the case, judge is going to be happy to see me, and I'm going to be happy to see the judge, and that's the way I like to keep it.
I really like that you said that.
Yeah.
Right? Because there is a relationship between you and the judge.
Without question.
You appear before the same group of judges
right.
in whatever line of work you're doing, right? It's the same group of judges.
Right.
And so, and they measure you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always taken back by lawyers who bring up frivolous things all the time with every case, and the judges just know it. It's like, why do you do this?
You start to lose your credibility with the judge if you do that.
Absolutely.
There are other reasons not to do that, but that's a pretty good practical one.
I agree with that. Now, I just the time that we're in kind of forces this question that I'm going to ask you. I'm going to ask you about COVID. What was, you know, about doing things over the internet and Zoom and all that. I know you got they moved you back to court, haven't they? Or is anything on Zoom anymore?
There's still some stuff on Zoom, but people are getting back in court, and it's.
So I do some foreclosure work, and all that's still on Zoom. You know, we still do the Zoom calls on it, at least here in Cook County. I'm not here because I'm in Lake County, but some counties, the collar counties, they went back to in person just to stop the Chicago lawyers from taking their job.
Oh, that's funny. I just didn't really even occur to me but
that's true.
I guess that makes sense. Well, I'm not in a position to comment whether I trust what you're saying. It makes sense, but
it makes sense. It does make sense.
No, it does make sense. I mean, so certainly one of the consequences of COVID. And I'm only laughing because there's so many. Where do you begin with that? But not because anything about it is funny. But yeah, certainly Zoom and remote technology has made its way into the practice in a way that I don't think is going to be the only way it's done. I mean, I prefer, and a lot of attorneys prefer depositions in person, court in person. But there are major convenience factors that play into it too. So, there's a little bit of a hybrid.
I can understand trials. You have to be in person.
Well, they had some, I believe they had some without.
Very difficult, I would think.
I just think you lose, look, we discussed doing this over Zoom, which would have been totally fine. And I've been a part of productions that were done that way. And I saw some that you did, which are great. But I think, you do lose something. What is that? Well, it might depend. But if there is some significant degree of communication that's occurring through body language, you lose that.
And there is.
You lose that. And certainly when it comes to trials and you've got witnesses whose credibility is being assessed by the jury, you want that witness, presumably, right? You want that witness to be seen by your jury. So when that expert's up there squirming, the jury can see him do it, see the witness do it. So, and that's just kind of a silly example. It's not silly example.
No, that's a good
example.
example. I think that's a good example.
Yeah. It's the practice of law too. It's fundamentally social in some way, right? I mean, it's
agreed.
It's about community standards, and that's what a jury is doing. They're telling the court what the community says about an issue. So being there matters, I think.
I agree with you. I agree with you. Now you're a partner in your law firm.
Yeah.
How much of your job involves marketing?
Yeah. Well, it's however much I want it to be. I mean, it could be zero. I just don't think that that's a good approach for me. I tend to think about it in terms of business development because, and not to be a lawyer or be nitpicky with words, it's just that we really don't do any traditional marketing. Like I would say this is probably the closest that we've gotten to do that, just kind of being on the radio. But I don't even consider this marketing. To me, this is talk, more of a business development. But I think I know where you're going. Go ahead, yeah.
Because as a trial attorney, right, people really pick their attorneys, but especially trial attorneys. If I'm injured, right, I'm really picking the guy. Sure. Right, I know this. I saw this guy, or maybe I never met him, but I'm going to go in and meet him, and it's my impression of him.
Sure.
That's going to be whether I think he's competent or not.
Definitely.
Right, and whether I want him, because you're representing them. It's it's a big
deal.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Who do you want to go stand up for you, right?
And fight for you. Yes,
and fight for you. So that matters.
The reason I like to ask that question because I'm involved in a lot of marketing. I'm always thinking about how marketing. Obviously, my practice is different than yours, but attorneys have this sometimes aversion to it.
I have an aversion to the marketing and even to the business aspects because I want to be a lawyer. Mm-hmm. But if you want to be a lawyer and you want to have independence, you have to pay attention to the business.
If you're going to be the partner, right, you could be an associate and just go to court.
Yeah, no, I had the benefit of joining a very well-established firm that was going to do well with or without me, when I started at least, when I was 25 and a brand new lawyer. Sure. So I got to kind of grow up in that environment. And kind of move into that role. So over time, I've been more and more conscious about developing business for sure. Well, there's a lot that I do that fits into that category.
If you're uncomfortable answering the question, then don't answer it. But how is it then that if I'm not marketing, how do people find me?
Well, I mean, I think if you're not putting yourself out there and trying to develop business, then it's just luck of the draw and luck of, do you want to leave your career up to luck?
Obviously not.
Probably not, especially when, and everybody knows this. In fact, if you want to be candid about it, it's one of the somewhat cliche kind of quote unquote humorous aspects that or things that people associate with plaintiffs' lawyers, billboards and advertising, which is weird because it's like a way, it's an out there kind of bold approach to a highly, highly personal, sensitive matter. So that's how it can come off sometimes, maybe not the way you want it to. And I've always been conscious of that, like in the way I approach my career. And I'm not critical of anyone marketing go show off your practice, but I'm also kind of moving into a more, being more conscious of the business, and I have been the whole time. But I guess, how do you do it? You can certainly go pay people to do SEO and spend a bunch of money to be on the first page, or you can put your billboards up or do, digital marketing. And there are people, all types of gurus, and some of them really do know what they're talking about. And, we don't do any of that. But my mind is open to maybe what might be appropriate, what I think is effective, and what I'm working on in terms of business development, which I've always been doing in some way, is, here, put it this way. Here's Leahy said, you got to be good, and people have to know you're good, and that's simple. That's a simple way to think about it. The complicated thing is, well, how do you get people to know? So, and I know I'm talking, but I'll give you a few examples.
That's good.
Get involved with the community, teach, write, speak. Do shows like this, make friends with people, other professionals, get out there. The most important thing you can do is work your case up the right way, have good results, and do the right thing for your clients. Then after that, all you have to do is kind of share what you've been doing.
Some of the most successful personal injury attorneys that I know, it's all referrals.
Yeah.
But they nurture those referrals.
Sure.
And so that's marketing. Right?
Sure. Yeah.
So I go to the same holiday party every year at a beautiful restaurant with a bunch of attorneys. He's nurturing us.
Totally.
Right?
Totally.
To bring in, but he's bringing in business.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
And so that's an avenue of marketing.
Yeah.
I think that gets lost.
Yeah. Totally.
But the reason why, and here's why I'm kind of going there, is that because you're very good at what you do, right?
I would like to think so.
Yeah, of course. You help.
We have an excellent firm. I don't want to sit here and talk about how awesome
our
firm is. Excellent.
Almost every time I get an attorney in a firm, they're always like, "I want to don't let us out my firm," and I get that.
Yeah.
But you guys do great work. Your firm does great work for your clients.
Sure.
It's your duty, in my opinion, to make sure that people who need you find you. Right? It's your duty.
Yeah, you could make that argument, but I'm not.
I just did.
Well, let me do the counter, because I don't want people getting ARDC complaints against them for not marketing. That's a joke, But yeah, if you have something that's of value, you should share it with people, and they can make their decision about what they want to do. Just have to be careful with it, when it's sensitive, because it's not like a business transaction with clients, right? So, but I share this with you too. Here's another example. It's right point. So right now, I'm serving for a year term as the president of a formal networking group. You've probably heard of them. Like BNI is the group. There are other groups like it, but they set up little chapters, right? So you get a group of people from all types of industries, not law specific.
It's a mastermind?
Yeah, kind of similar. So what you do is it's referrals. You learn about, and also it's just being in an environment with people with an entrepreneurial spirit who are trying to figure out how to do things. So that is something that I do, which is it's not my usual thing. I picked it up about 4 years ago just because it's different. But it's a great group. I'm going to do a plug for it. It's called Connecting Great People, River North chapter. We've got about 15, 16 members, and we're looking to grow a little bit.
Do you live over there in River North?
It's nearby in the West Loop.
Because I lived in River North.
Town.
I thought I lived in River North for many years.
Yeah, West Town neighborhood. But it's a great group, and we have a lot of people with a similar ethic, where it's like we're developing our skills, and we're trying to figure out how we can, bring them to people in a way that, that is professional, that's organic. So,
well, I'm just always interested in how people find clients, because again, I really believe that if I believe that my service is good or better than anybody else, then it's my duty to make sure that if somebody needs me, they can find me.
Sure.
And I'm sure you've had clients who tell you, I thank God for you, because you helped me so much, and then you just kind of get goosebumps, like, this is why I do it.
That's one of the, absolutely. That's one of the things that you look for at the end of the case. When you sign up a case, part of what you're thinking in your mind is, I'm really hopeful at the end of this case that this person's just going to be like, what you did for me is amazing, because it's an incredible feeling. And that's also something that I think will help guide you through the process, and also get a little bit more juice out of you when you feel like your tank is empty, frankly.
Yeah, very good. I like that. First I want to tell you I appreciate you spending the time with me. I don't know where we are on time, but I always like to start. Towards the end, I always like to ask this question: What do you think makes a good attorney?
Well, I'm gonna give you what are called the 3 C's, which I did not make up, which I think they're made up by another prominent Chicago or someone else in the legal community many years ago. 3 C's are competence, credibility, and charisma. This is one way to look at it. So competence just means you can do the job. You know what you're doing, right? It also means that you've been diligent, that you have the threshold to get in there. And this is really about being a trial lawyer specifically, but I think there are principles that apply across dimensions, right? So that's competence. That's your basic. You need that. If you don't have that, you could be a mess. And then you have credibility. Credibility means that you can be trusted, right? That the jury, the court, the folks that you're presenting to can have confidence that what you're saying is accurate, that you're not misleading them, that you have an obligation to the court of candor and to them, right? And then charisma, it's the X factor that puts it over the top that we can't really define, and hopefully we have, right? So those are that's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it's the same as anything else. Understand what you're doing, know why you're doing it, commit to it, don't take shortcuts, communicate with your client, know their story. Don't think because you're the lawyer that you shouldn't listen to them. The clients will tell you stuff you never would have thought of. And sometimes you don't even realize it until you really sit down with them and hear it. Sometimes they'll tell you a lot of stuff that doesn't matter at all. So you got to sort through that. You have to listen. I think what makes a good lawyer, and people have gone on and on about it. But one of the things that I think that I love about what we do is that I think it calls pretty close to all of you. I think when you're there representing somebody, you can't just show up with half of yourself with your mind somewhere else. I think you really have to be there fully, and that means doing all the things that we know we're supposed to do in order to be our best at something, and that just helps you. Frankly, I think it helps. It's a good way to kind of stay oriented even beyond the practice.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. I think tell me a little bit about your growth as an attorney. What have you noticed as for yourself from when you first came in as a 20-year-old kid to where you are today?
Well, I like to think, and I think I can find evidence for it, that I'm wiser and more confident. And I think that at the beginning, I would probably, I still have the same level of intensity, but I think I'm more calm and have more confidence. And, I'm less obsessed with this idea that you have to be tough or come across as tough. Because I think when you get started, especially in this practice, right? New attorney, and you've got an insurance company and defense attorneys who are always more seasoned than you are at the beginning, if you're actually handling the case, which I was, so I'd be working with attorneys who are older, have more experience on the other side. So I think that I had to be firm and be tough, and you definitely do, but developing relationships with the attorneys who you're going to work with them again and again and again. So it's like, focus on the merits, represent your client. And also, here, I'll give you just one example. This is a little bit of you mentioned kind of war stories, or maybe we talked before, and those are fun sometimes, and you got to be careful how you tell them because they can sound tacky, like here's me being a hero. I'll give you a slightly different story, but I think it's something that I really like about the practice, where it represents kind of how I've grown a little bit. I had a case, I was probably about 4 or 5 years in, maybe a little bit more, and there was a guy on the other case who was a newer attorney. It's good, smart, newer. And it was a case that had a lot of tension between the parties and even between the firms. And I think if I were younger, I might have approached it differently without thinking. But basically, I became really good friends with him. Ended up being, and I was kind of joking with him that he was on the wrong side of the case, not just because he had a bad case on this one, but because I was like, this guy's a plaintiff's lawyer. Like, I can tell. I was like, you're on the wrong side of the law, basically. It was a kind of joke or humorous. And he ended up, not necessarily just because of that, but he made his way over to the other side, and he's an incredible plaintiff's attorney. And those are stories that I like, because it's like, it was a big mess at the beginning. The case went really well for the client, and the adversary is a friend. If you can do that, you're making your life easy.
I guess I had a case early in my career where I we got toe to toe with the other attorney, and we turned out to be good friends.
Yeah.
And I've referred people to him many times.
Well, you learn a lot. You get close to people that you're competitive with. I mean, if you want to get to know someone, play one-on-one with them.
Isn't that something, you're a personal injury attorney, so other personal injury attorneys you don't really interact with, except you might see them in court.
Right, or through the bar.
But,
we're pretty close, and we like to strategize and kind of talk.
Okay.
There are political things too involved. And
most of the people that I go are the people I'm against, right?
Oh yeah.
So those are the people that you're dealing with. Those are the people you work with.
Yeah, that's another thing too about the practice and litigation. It's like you're coming home from work every day. Everyone you talk to is telling you you're wrong. That's a little hyperbolic because I think part of what you can do is agree and resolve things, but. And that's what a lot of it is. Even in litigation, a lot of it is you're making deals on discovery. You're working on the case with your adversary. It's your project with them, right? So that doesn't mean that you get along where you have, conflicts on the merits, but like that you just agree or lay down. You don't. You fight hard there, but on scheduling, it's like I'm not trying to make your life hard, right? Mm-hmm. Let's go hard where we need to, and then. Civility and kind of collegiality while maintaining a healthy, strong, zealous approach, I think that's the balance that you want to strike. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good place to probably stop our interview and leave it for next time because I'd love to have you back.
Oh yeah, I had a lot of fun. Thank you very much.
I'm glad you did have fun. I had fun too. So you shared a lot of great insight, and that's why I love to interview attorneys, especially again you've been experienced attorneys. When you said that there's people that don't like, there's attorneys that don't like their practice, and there's lots of that. Sure. Not my interviews because most of the people I'm interviewing, they like what they do.
Yeah, who's going to come on your show, especially with like your attitude and your personality, and come on here and talk about how they don't like their practice? So I'd imagine it's somewhat self-selecting. You're getting the right.
Well, I
people.
guess that's true. I guess that's true.
Yeah. But it's a lot of fun.
But it's I think you've come across which is what I want people to know, that being an attorney is important. It's important. There's a lot of pressure on attorneys because again, you're representing somebody else, and you want an attorney that personalizes that, and I think you've done that. So thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, well, we're going to be back. I think next week we have one of my adversaries actually that I've known for many years. Attorney Newman, I think he's going to be here next week. So, so just what we were just talking about, right? He works on the other side. I'd known him for many years.
Yeah, that's great.
And he's going to be on the show next week. So join us next week here at the Trust Radio Network. And in the meantime,